From Studio 1A in Tampa, Florida, comes a talk show that really feels your pain and tells you like it is. We love America and all that freedom-loving Americans want to protect. Live from coast to coast and on your radio, it's For the People with Keith Allen.
We'll help you survive this thing called life. We're for the people. Whatever your source of stress or strife, for the people is there.
Well, hello, Mr. and Mrs. America. I am Keith Allen, and proudly welcoming you to this Friday's edition of For the People on October the 19th, 2018. And for some reason, and I already know the answer of why it doesn't feel like Halloween is right around the corner, though we have a cold front, supposedly, that's going to sweep further down to where we are here in Tampa, Florida, but it's not going to get down to the 40s or anything crazy like that at this point. We're just going to go probably from the 90s to the 80s. It's been sweltering. We definitely need some kind of relief there for sure. Our first half hour, usually on the second half hour, we have a guest, but I thought it was really important to bring on a gentleman that a new book that is coming out that chronicles the experiences of a man who has served our country with honor and distinction, bravery. I just cannot imagine what our military people go through when they're on the battlefield and they see carnage, they're being shot at, and we're not just talking a BB gun, we're talking full fire and going in where there's terrorists, and they want to kill you any way they possibly can. Ephraim is our guest today, and he's got a book that's going to be coming out on the 23rd of this month, and he says to me shortly before I got him on the phone, well, right after I got him off the phone, I asked him, and he said about the book, he says, don't let the book scare you. City of Death he says it's really an uplifting book, and that's the name of the book. It's City of Death, Humanitarian Warriors in the Battle of Mosul, and it's going to be available everywhere, again, October 23rd, and you need to pick up this book, but more importantly, I want you to stay tuned for Ephraim Mattos. He is on the line right now. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, sir.
Hey, good morning, Keith. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I got to ask you right off the bat, how long were you a Navy SEAL?
I was in the Navy for 6 years and 4 months. The first 2 years of that, though, is just the arduous process of becoming a SEAL. So once I actually got to my SEAL team, I was an active duty SEAL for about 4.5 years. Okay,
and did you have a moment at a high school or some experience, somebody come up to you and say, hey, you would be great at serving in the armed forces? What made you go into the armed forces?
Well, no, I had the exact opposite experience, actually. I was raised in a very uber conservative, fundamentalist Christian household. Like it was a good upbringing. It was great, but it was like uber strict, right?
Yeah.
And so growing up, like, girls weren't allowed to wear pants.
Oh, man.
You couldn't go to movie theaters, right? Stuff like that. So
wow, it almost sounds like the Amish, man.
Well, in many ways it was, but you lived in. I grew up in Milwaukee.
Okay.
It was totally fine. It was for all intents and purposes, I lived a pretty normal life. Just very strict rules growing up. And so my father, he actually served in the Air Force Reserve when I was growing up, and so that was my intro. That was my understanding of the military. And then we also, we'd watch war movies like Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, And so I was always fascinated with the military guys and what they would do, and I loved it. And it always just, I don't know, spoke to my soul. Those guys out there fighting, helping other people, and I was like, I want to do that. But growing up, joining the military was not something that was really encouraged. It wasn't discouraged, but it certainly wasn't encouraged because they wanted us to grow up and be, pastors and ministers and things like that. But one day I decided, I was like, you want to know what? I need to, and I talk about this in the book, City of Death. I talk about this transformation where I had this moment when I was about 15 and a half years old when I realized, you know what? I have free will. God does not want me to not pursue the things that I'm passionate about and that burn in my soul, simply for the sake of religion. I was like, that's not God. That's not truth. That's not in the Bible anywhere.
Wow.
And so I made the decision that I was going to go be a SEAL. And
how old were you?
That was about 15 and a half.
So you knew.
I knew I wanted to be a SEAL. I didn't know if I didn't know if I was actually going to make it.
If you could make it, yeah.
I was like, okay, I still had 2 years of high school left, and so when I made that decision, I sort of had this kind of coming out of the closet experience, if you will,
sure.
Where I had to tell everybody that I was like I don't want to do the missionary or the pastor thing. I want to go be a SEAL when I grow up. And that was not taken very well.
No, I'd imagine not. Why would you want to do something like that?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Why would you want to be Rambo?
Right. Why would it was people that were upset that I wasn't following in their sort of religious idea that they had sort of molded me
sure.
To do. So after that happened, and again, I talk about all this in the book, City of Death, I ended up having to leave the small school that I was at. It was like 75 kids in the entire school, and that's kindergarten through 12. I grew up with one other boy in my grade and 3 girls, a total of 5 of us in the class. And I told everybody, I was like, hey, I'm not coming back to the school because I was one of the teachers actually got up during a chapel service and said, we don't need more Navy SEALs, we need more preachers, And of course, everybody knows he's talking to me because I'm the only one, that wanted to be a SEAL. So I was like, you know what, I it wasn't a rebellion. It was more of a I respectfully disagree. They're good people. I no hard feelings toward them. But so yeah, I actually ended up my 11th grade year of high school. I ended up having to homeschool myself because my parents would not allow me to go to a public school.
Huh.
So I had to homeschool myself.
Yourself.
And then I also, yeah. So
stunning.
Yeah, it was a crazy experience. I call it my year of darkness because I basically overnight, literally, I lost pretty much my entire community, everybody and everything I ever knew. And then I also started working third shift at McDonald's. So I'd go to work at 11 o'clock at night, get off at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, ouch.
And then I'd go to the YMCA to teach myself how to swim.
Love the Y, man. Thank God for the YMCA.
I know. I love the YMCA. I actually ended up working there for a while.
Nothing wrong with the Y, man. I grew up.
Oh, the YMCA is great.
Love them, man. Good. They should have more of them.
I completely agree. I always keep my YMCA membership active, even when I'm not using it, because I just believe in the cause.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to introduce, before we go any further, and you just tuned into the broadcast here, we have U.S. Navy SEAL Ephraim Mattos with us right now, and he was an American sniper, and he's got a book that he teamed up with Scott McEwen, of all people, co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, American Sniper, to write this upcoming book, City of Death, Humanitarian Warriors in the Battle of Mosul. I mean, it's a trip. I mean, we got the stereotypical idea of what a tough guy sounds like, but you don't have the Rambo-sounding voice. You just sound like a regular person.
I don't. Well, actually, a funny thing, one of the things I talk about in the book is that I have a line in there where I say, I'm more like you than you realize. And it's like I'm not Rambo, and and I think a lot of people think like, oh, the SEAL thing, it's like this unattainable dream. But what I actually tell people is, you could make it through SEAL training. You absolutely could. The average person absolutely can. Now, you might not be able to do as many push-ups or the pull-ups or whatever is required, but as far as the toughness and the grit of making it through,
yep,
you can do it if you have a good enough reason, right? If someone that you loved and their life was on the line, you would find a way to make it through. You wouldn't give up. So people always doubt themselves and say, "Oh, I can never do that." And I always tell them, "Yes, you actually can."
Now let me drop the bombshell here. You were shot, from what I understand, by ISIS on what is termed a suicidal rescue mission to retrieve wounded civilians. Take me there. What happened?
Okay, absolutely. So also to clarify, I'm a former SEAL. I'm
okay.
No longer active
Thank you for saying
that. Clarify that for any of our listeners.
Yeah. Former SEAL.
former SEAL. So I got out last year, and I went and volunteered to do humanitarian work in northern Iraq with a group called the Free Burma Rangers.
Why would you want to do that?
I for the same reason I joined the Navy.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go to war zones and help people.
Absolutely.
It was a natural fit. So when I got over there, we had been involved in the fighting in Mosul, and we were attached to an Iraqi army unit. We were being their frontline medics, is essentially what we were doing, and then we were also administering humanitarian aid to the civilians who were breaking free. Well, one morning we found a fresh massacre site where ISIS had killed more than 150 people in the street, slaughtered them, men, women, children, elderly folks. There was, I remember one man specifically, he was in a wheelchair, slumped over in the middle of the street because they just executed him right there.
Yikes.
A large group of people had tried to flee and get away from ISIS territory, and they just slaughtered them all with machine gun fire. Well, we found that massacre site the day after it happened as the Iraqi army front line advanced further into the city of Mosul. And when we got up there, we found this massacre site, but in the piles, and literally piles of dead people everywhere, we saw people still alive. There were kids still alive. Kids 4, 5, 6 years old walking around from body to body looking for food and water.
Oh, my. What a scene.
They didn't understand what had happened. It was unbelievable. It was the most horrific thing I'd ever seen.
Children.
You think children, like little kids. And so that morning we saw 4 kids alive and 2 men who had been shot, who were also in this sort of pile of bodies right in front of ISIS headquarters. So they're literally right across the street from ISIS, and just sort of in this large open area. And so we knew we had to do something. We were screaming at the kids to run to us. We brought up the Iraqis, and they were screaming at them in Arabic, like, just run across the street, run across the street. And they wouldn't move to us. And this was a large, probably 6-lane highway before the war had started. So it was just a big flat area of rubble.
I see.
But the kids were completely in shock. They were walking around like zombies.
Yeah, no kidding.
They looked over at us because they could hear us, but they didn't understand that all they had to do was cross the street.
How could you, right? I mean, that's just, wow, how devastating to see those images. I mean, you see it on TV and the movies, but in real life, I mean, they would have to have been partially in shock, if not in shock.
Oh, absolutely. The kids were in complete shock, and we didn't realize it at the time, but they were essentially dying because it was so hot where they were at. Like, so they're out in the open street. It's the middle of, it's the beginning of June. It's June 2nd when this happened, and so the sun is so hot, and they've been baking them the entire day before.
What's the temperature over there on an average day in the summer?
You're looking between 95 to 105 degrees dry heat, and the sun is extremely intense. Sometimes it'll even get up to be 110, 115. That's not uncommon in the slightest.
That's hot.
And it's extremely hot, and these kids are out there with no water. Well, so we put together a rescue plan. We were like, hey, we got to go get these kids. We have no option but to go. And so when we made the decision to go, we told the Iraqis that we needed some sort of armored vehicle to get us up the street, or else we were all going to get shot up at, trying to get up the street to get these kids. Because we literally had to run right into ISIS territory, and ISIS had not only the ground in front of us, the buildings in front of us, but also they had the buildings on our right flank. So in military terms, they owned the entire battle space.
I see.
And so this is really, really great. This is, you want to talk about loving being an American. Our team leader, David Eubank, he called the American general in the area and reported the massacre. And the American military actually sent a drone overhead and got eyes on the situation and what was happening there. And when they saw what was happening, they agreed, if the Iraqis requested it, they agreed to drop a smoke screen for us, an artillery smoke screen, so we could run up the street and get these kids. So miles away, there's an artillery battery that opens fire, and they start dropping white phosphorus smoke shells into this large open area, so ISIS can't quite see us. Well, the Iraqis, they didn't want to go up the street because they knew it was suicide. So they agreed to give us one tank.
One.
One American-made tank. We had one.